Hello and welcome to today's module. We're talking about walking and running mechanics. So you want to get fit for adventure, right? You want to go hiking for long bouts of time without getting tired. You want to go walking, shopping, hanging out with your friends without feeling like, man, why am I so tired all of a sudden? Or you want to start running consistently and not feeling like, man, I just finished a run and I have another random ache or pain that I don't know why it's happening or what it's doing. So if you are going through any of these things, what we can focus on is improving your walking and running mechanics. So some things that can go wrong when you're walking or running in terms of our body positioning. So a lot of times our body positioning can do one of these three things that can really cause instability, which then leads to more impact on joints that aren't supposed to be taking brunt forceful impact from walking and running. So some of those things are having too much of a arched low back. In turn, this also comes with people who lock their knees a lot. So I would like you to get out of the habit of locking your knees and instead bend your knees slightly, and again, keep that pelvis slightly tucked as if you're always trying to squeeze a little penny between your booty cheeks, okay? And I promise it may be uncomfortable for a little bit at first, but you'll get more and more used to it, and then it will just be that position that feels better when you're standing. Slightly bent knees, toes forward, booty squeezed, chest lifted. But what can go wrong here? A lot of things that can go wrong, even if we are trying to stand with our best posture, is a hip hike. So a hip hike will look something like this. Maybe your hips are shifted to the side, a hip is slightly raised. This can be due to either a tension through your glute medius or glute minimus, or through some other area like maybe a leg length discrepancy. And for either of those, what we can do is address it with the mobility exercises, as well as being aware of what and how we're walking. So if you do have a leg length discrepancy, one thing I'll say is that a wider stance is going to help with that, because when your legs are together, that's when you're putting the most force on your legs. When your legs are apart, you're sharing more of the weight with not only your legs, but also your hips. So get in the habit of having a slightly wider stance when you're both standing, walking, and running. I used to do it all the time. I was a big runner, and I would actually have like marks on my inner calf from running cross country, and then we'd get done with a race and I would just have dirt all up and down my legs, and I'd be like, why do I have that? And I was actually kicking myself during the run. Later, I went to a running mechanics camp, and I actually went to that camp for 2 weeks, and so that camp only lasted 1 week, but I was so obsessed with it that I went for 2 total weeks, and they talked all about the running mechanics. I'll learn more about it later on, but I always kept this lesson with me. When you run, so many people make the mistake of placing their foot out in front of them. And a lot of times we do that because we think, if we're going forward, we have to be stepping forward, right? But the movement to propel you forward doesn't occur with the front leg. It occurs with the back leg. The back leg is what is propelling you forward, but it can't do that if your foot is not doing the proper motion. So, dorsiflexion, we've talked about this in another video, is that dorsiflexion, how your toe pulls up towards your shin, is going to be essential for your walking mechanics. But you can't just dorsiflex when you walk. There's a moment when you have to plantar flex or point your toe down. That makes your calf fire. So when is that motion? That motion is when you are stepping back. So practice this with me. If you aren't standing, get up now. Let's do this together. You're going to have your feet at hip width apart. And if you don't know what hip width apart is yet, I want you to place your hands on your hips right now. Okay, place your hands on your hips and search for your hip bones. They're in the inner sides, right in front. And so if we can travel that hip bone and align that hip bone with the patella and align that patella with the toe, with the big toe, that is really good alignment. That is going to be the most functional alignment for your legs. A lot of times I see this mistake. Our hips are out here, but we're standing close in. That turns off your glutes. Your glutes cannot fire, and then more pressure is going to be placed on the low back. Another mistake I see is people pointing their toes out all of the time. This puts a lot of pressure on your knees, and it does help you engage your glutes more, but I can see how more and more shin and lack of dorsiflexion can occur. Plus, you can't be walking like this. This is not functional walking. Okay? So, toes have to be pointed forward. Knees need to be slightly bent. Pelvis needs to be slightly tucked. Chest lifted. Here we go. So, you're going to practice lifting a leg up with dorsiflexion. Now, we're not going to move anywhere. You're going to place your heel out in front of you, and you're going to swoop it around and then bring your heel towards your bum. Now, as we do that, one more time, I want you to plantar flex right here. And then as you come back, when the heel comes back, dorsiflex again. So the plantar flex happens after you pass the other foot. And that's exactly where you want to be placing your foot when you're walking or running. So not out in front of you, right underneath of you. So how do you do that? Kara, how do I continue to walk forward if I keep just walking in the same place? It's because your back leg is what is propelling you forward. For example, I'm going to start over here. I'm just going to walk. You're going to watch me walk. And with walking, of course, your heels are going to come out in front of you a little bit, but notice how my toes press me forward. They're doing a constant dorsiflexion flexion, and it's super small, right? We're going to practice the extreme now so that when you're walking, you don't have to think about it so much, right? So the extreme is your knee comes up to about hip height, your heel comes out in front of you, you swoop it, you point, you draw back in with the dorsiflexion, and you continue. All right? So this is going to be the same thing for walking, only even more prevalent to not put that heel out in front of you. So with walking, of course, you just saw, like, my heel is somewhat in front of me. We're walking forward because you're not getting that jump, that propulsion that running gives you. You want that heel to also plant down and our toe to be flexing. The move here. Oh, wait, this is the move because your arms have to be opposite. And then at this moment, when we're pulling forward, I dorsiflexed, and then now my booty is squeezing. That's the next thing. When in either walking or running, the glute can be a sleepy, okay? So if your back calf is going off, you also want your back glute to be going off. This is the move. Squeeze your glute, flex your calf. Squeeze your glute, flex your calf. In walking or running, that's what the back leg is doing. The front leg, toe forward, feet at hip width apart. Lots of width there. And now as I step onto this leg is going to straighten. My glute is going to squeeze. My knee has to come forward, right? Toe has to dorsiflex. And now my butt is already squeezed. It's already ready for that propulsion forward. So do you see how the calf and the glute are connected and how these two areas that are commonly weak points and that you are working on strengthening inside of your physical activity regimens, you are getting these areas stronger, but you have to be aware of all of the other areas and times, like walking and running, that these things can be not firing correctly. And it just happens. It happens because of the environments we put ourselves in. It happens because of the shoes we wear. It happens because of the areas that we walk on. Sometimes if we walk on certain surfaces, we just get in the habit of walking on those types of surfaces, right? So the next thing I want to say is that if you have excessive pelvic rotation, meaning like your hips move around a lot as you walk, we're gonna need to learn to squeeze that glute more, learn to engage those glutes, because hips moving around is going to wreak havoc again on that low back. So hips moving around would look something like this, like just that side to side motion. I'll try to walk at an angle so you can see. All right, so sure, it looks good, but that hip swaying is causing a lot of tension on our IT bands and on our tensor fascia lata, or TFL for short, which is a connector between our hip and our leg bone. So that thing is not connecting the hip and the low back. If that is not firing properly, if you are constantly swaying from side to side, then your low back is not going to be as stable and it's going to hurt later on. And then the same thing if you're doing any crossing over. A lot of this comes from your feet being too close together or swaying and internally rotating our feet as we walk. So as you walk, if you are going kind of more in a straight line, or the model walk, you're walking straight, but your hips are actually internally and externally rotating with each and every step, which you'd think, oh, that's great, I'm getting both internal and external rotation, but it's only in the forward plane. So there's so many planes of motion, right? There's 3 planes. You can go in the forward, the side, or the twisting, turning, and you're making twisting, turning happen during a forward motion, okay? So this is where the science of the movement patterns really come to play here, because we don't notice that we're doing these things. And then we go to the physical therapist, we go to the doctor and say, I don't know why these things are hurting. Why am I hurting? And it's just because we're repeatedly doing these repetitive motion tasks that cause breakdown and inflammation. And that's not fun, right? We don't want to have breakdown and inflammation. We want to be getting stronger. So here are the muscles that we need to get stronger in order to improve our walking patterns. So the deep longitudinal subsystem, the muscles required for walking and running are the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the TFL, the glutes, the shin muscles, or the dorsiflexors, and the calf, or the plantar flexors. So those are the main things that we want to work on strengthening. The last thing I want to mention is those hip flexors. So our hip flexors, the things that are going to bring our knees up, these are very commonly weak in people who sit at desks for work or who do a lot of forward motion activities without strength training the behind. So the hip flexors, they can be both weak and overactive at the same time, and this is a cause for a lot of pain in people. So how do you strengthen your hip flexors? You do moves like this. And this probably looks very familiar from some of our programs, right? We love to do these types of moves to strengthen this area. Here's what you can do when you're doing that move to really reinforce that pattern. So as you come up, your hip flexes. We feel that flexion point. We still want our hip, our knee, and our big toe to be in alignment. So is this in alignment? No. 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 Okay, this is alignment. Knee, hip, ankle in a straight line. And our bodies really, really like it when we're in a straight line, when we're completely engaging the right muscle groups to stand, walk, and run in a good functional movement pattern. So I'm so excited for you because you are already strengthening these moves, but the awareness coming into walking and running is what's going to change things. So keep those feet at hip width apart, keep your knees slightly bent, keep dorsiflexing and plantar flexing. Also make sure that you are not, or you are aware of your hip hiking or any swaying that you're doing. It might feel awkward at first, but just start practicing, and you are going to get better and better at it. And soon it will just become a way of life, and it will be and feel so good and so functional. So continue on. Great work in your programs. Keep knocking out those training workouts, and you guys are doing so great.